Hello, and welcome to the Communicators, a new interview series by Peruzzi, where we chat with expert witnesses to tackle one big question: what makes an effective communicator? I'm Shivani Lodhia, and this week we're thrilled to have Jess Jones join us to help answer this question. So Jess is previously, in a former life, City AM's TMT reporter. She's now entered the deep dark world of PR, and we'll be talking to her about both those roles, what the links are, what's different, and what makes her a good communicator. So welcome, Jess.
Thank you very much for having me, Shivani.
So welcome. So tell us a bit about you, about what you're up to at Seat Unique, how long you've been there, and we'll get stuck in.
Great, thank you. So I've been communications manager at Seat Unique for coming up to 2 months now. And essentially that means I manage all the external communications for the company, which involves, as you know, getting media coverage, communicating with investors, all of that kind of thing. We're a premium ticketing company. What that means essentially is that we partner with rights holders, so like venues, sports clubs, promoters, and we sell their premium and hospitality inventory for them.
Very exciting and a big change. So I'm actually going to start off and ask about City AM, do probably half of this interview about that, and then move on to Seat Unique. But actually, one new question is, what attracted you to journalism in the first place?
Yeah, of course. I think like a lot of journalists, I started working on the student paper at university, and in local papers in the area, and I really enjoyed that. Love reading journalism, and I've always liked writing, and it comes quite naturally to me. So yeah, that was fair. That was an easy choice, really.
Great. And then you landed at City AM, sort of quite new into that journey, and
I did a couple of internships there, and I really liked it. It's a really fun place to start. You're kind of thrown in at the deep end and just learn to deal with it pretty much. So that's kind of where it all kicked off.
yeah, exciting. And I think you're probably on the best beat. Definitely what is my favorite. And like me, you don't have that science engineering academic background. So I was just wondering, like, how do you think that's an asset? And maybe was that sort of a hindrance on the first day of like an overload, or the first time I've heard the word semiconductor, or how did that make you feel?
Yeah, it was definitely a challenge when I started out because like you said, didn't have any kind of science or tech background. And so I was going into all these interviews and meetings, kind of completely unaware of the world of semiconductors and data centers and AI. And so I learned really quickly, which was good. But it was quite daunting at first, especially when you're speaking to people who are really high up, and in really senior roles at these companies, and you kind of don't really know what you're doing, let alone about the industries they work in. But no, it was definitely an exciting challenge, and like you said, like a great beat to be on, really good fun, and at such an exciting time for TMT.
Yeah, of course. And I guess with TMT, there's so much to be had there. So for those that maybe don't know tech, media, telecoms, they could easily be spun out into their own sort of sections. But do they complement each other fairly well? Is there one sector that appealed to you more than the others?
There was definitely lots of overlap, particularly with AI and how AI was influencing media and telecoms and tech. Um, I guess the media side is the most like glamorous, and so naturally it is quite exciting and fun to report on. But yeah, no, I really enjoyed learning about the more technical parts of things as well. It's a good mix, and there's like never any shortage of topics and stories to write about, so that was always good.
And just on the whole AI front, I guess you were definitely working at a time where AI is taking off. And I think from a PR industry perspective, we can kind of see that it seems like every PR is trying to link, however weak the link might be, link back to AI. It's something we're obviously advising clients that unless you've got a tangible, proper hook, just don't go there. Like, talk about what you are, don't try and shoehorn yourself into this trend. How did that bandwagon make you feel, especially as a kind of, you get so many emails in your inbox every day? How did you identify which stories were ripe for the picking?
Yeah, there were a lot of AI pitches in my inbox, and a lot of them were kind of all in the same vein of like 60% of CEOs say that AI is going to make a big difference on their company, and it's
Yeah.
the ones that are really cut through were the ones that actually just said something completely different, or they had kind of a interesting hook or angle, or their product was really different. And I think, yeah, didn't always get that right. Sometimes you'd think you were onto something really exciting, and it would actually turn out to be kind of less than you thought, or you'd miss something and then you'd see it a bit later and you're like, oh, I wish I'd actually taken the time to explore that a bit more. So yeah, I think it's a tricky one, and things are kind of becoming a bit easier now to sort of sift through, at least.
Good. Are you using AI to sift through your inbox yet, or not quite?
Luckily, it's not quite as busy as it used to be, so that's good.
No, of course. And just in terms of, you obviously get to speak to a lot of people as part of a job like that. Who was the best communicator, and why? Like, what did you look for in a good spokesperson?
Yeah, great question. What did I look for? Well, I mean, as you'll know, journalists love punchy, soundbitey quotes that they can use to kind of get a point across really quickly and effectively. Better if there's not any technical jargon in there, which sometimes is unavoidable in tech. But I think, yeah, the best ones were always the ones who could kind of convey an opinion or explain something in a really concise way that you don't need any sort of technical background or expertise to understand. And yeah, that's quite hard to do. So I always admired people who could do it, and often do it with a sense of humor as well.
Definitely someone with a real personality rather than just sort of a puppet being put up for
Yeah,
shows.
someone that says something that doesn't sound like an AI generated quote, which you'd be surprised at how rare that is to come by.
Oh dear. Oh dear. Well, moving on. But in a similar way to the last question, you do speak to a wide range of people, and I think especially with City AM and the kind of focus that it has as a paper, did you feel that people communicated with you differently depending on whether they were a founder or, you know, representative of a massive organization? Was it kind of easier to speak to some people than others?
Yeah, I guess you go into the interview with different expectations. So obviously, if you're speaking to someone high up at a FTSE 100 company, they're not going to be able to say the same things as a startup founder. And so, yeah, you go in with a different anticipation of what's going to come out of the interview and what the story might be. But I think I would still treat them the same in how I'd ask questions and what I would ask about. But yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, totally, totally. It's just in my head, I guess startup founders can be much more vocal. And I'm not saying there's a drawback to that, but you know, you're not regulated. So when you talk about, you can be quite free on finances or punchy about everything because you're not answerable to thousands of shareholders in the same way. And I think it's something that we're trying to push across to clients that actually now you're at a stage where you've got free reign, kind of think
Yeah,
about how you're going to use that before that changes.
I definitely think there's a chance to be a bit more loose-lipped, not in the not in a way that would damage the brand, but
No, no, exactly.
you've
Exactly.
yeah, people are a bit more forgiving when you're a younger company as well, I guess.
Definitely, definitely. And if you had to pick a favorite story, what would it be?
Ooh, Yeah, it's hard. I also think that like having reflected on a lot of my time at CTAM recently, um, I think the difference between like your favorite stories and the best stories, yeah, they're not always the same ones. So my favorite one personally was probably an interview I did with the CEO of Code First Girls, and she was really great to chat to. She had so many interesting points about being a business, and also doing social good at the same time. And yeah, it tied into a lot of the themes that I was writing about. So data, AI, women in tech, and also interviews are always really fun to write up because yeah, you can spice them up with bits of color and personality in the way that you can't always do with straight news. So yeah, really enjoyed that one. But on what was my best story, I don't know. You'd have to ask someone more objective. Um, I do think there was anytime you work with another journalist is always you. I always stories were really good because you get double the amount of sources and you get more perspectives. And yeah, more eyes on the story. So I loved one that I did with my colleague Elliot, who's the investment reporter, and we did one about the AI bubble and is it going to burst? And yeah, it was just really interesting to kind of speak to loads of people in investment industries and in AI and kind of watch them overlap and see where that story went. So yeah, that's probably the other one that I really enjoyed writing.
Cool. Now, given the change, do you have FOMO, like with a big AI opportunities plan this week, where you're like, oh, I'm not writing about this?
Yeah, there have been a few moments when I've been like, I wish I was reporting on this right now, or like I'd love to write that story for sure. But no, it's also really it's nice actually having being able to take a step back and kind of do a bit more reading and see what other people are writing about. And I listened to the Rest is Money podcast, I think it was, with Peter Kyle, and really enjoyed that. So yeah, a little bit of FOMO.
No, I'm sure. I'm sure it was a big one this week. Um, just to pivot quickly to government, I know that there were times where we'd be talking about various things and you'd be ringing up DSIT or contacts there would be giving you information. Do you feel they communicated differently to people in the private sector? Was there kind of more reading between the lines? How was it communicating with government?
Um, Often, I don't know if it was any different, but I mean, often I'd call them up and they'd explain stuff to me on background and kind of give me a rundown of the reason behind why things were happening when and how, and like specific elements of policies and everything. Um, yeah, I don't know if it was any different to the private sector really. Um, yeah, I wouldn't say it was particularly different.
Okay, interesting. I guess just always useful for us because I know with PRs and journalists, we need to see it both ways. I think because like you guys are such a treasure trove of information, and it's quite useful to when we're talking about different things. That okay, I'm not always having to talk to you just because I'm pitching you a story. It's actually I can use you as a source and know that you've got good info.
Yeah, sometimes it's quite good just to have a catch up, not for anything story related, but just hear what's going on.
Yes, especially as someone who doesn't share that science background, it's quite nice to, okay, did you know what this bit meant? Nope. But, figuring it out together is how I like to see it. Um, a final question I'd say, I know that AI aside, maybe things like semiconductors, quantum computing, data centers, they're all emerging more and more in the public conscience. And how do you feel that changed your reporting, if it did? And do you feel like maybe there was just a wider set of public understanding about how important those topics now are?
Yeah, I think it was always a challenge kind of being so involved and being so focused on AI and reporting on it every day because it's kind of hard to take a step back and be like, okay, what does the average person know? What are my friends reading? What do they know about it? And I remember my editor saying to me once, like, Jess, you need to kind of explain some of these things a bit more, like ChatGPT. And I was like, but everyone knows what ChatGPT is, but they really don't. And I mean, I think the majority of people do now, but when I was first starting, it was still quite new and people didn't really get how it worked or what it was. So yeah, I think just that was always a challenge, but public awareness has definitely changed now. And I think I think the majority of people would know what ChatGPT is now.
Definitely. I think it's interesting because so for us with data centers, not something that was in the public consciousness at all. And I think more and more people are now saying, I think, who says this, but, it's not just Taylor Swift and cat videos that are being, they're not emerging from somewhere. It's actually being powered by a data center. But I guess concepts like that are really hard to get to grips with. So would you say that people who are able to link it to our lives and maybe make those Taylor Swift connections, do they make better spokespeople?
Yeah, 100%. I think if you can give a real life parallel or example, and try and helping people to kind of understand beyond the abstract of the cloud and the Internet of Things and data centers. I think anything that can help kind of bridge that gap is really helpful. And that's a really hard thing to do, especially when I know if you come from a tech background, often like it's so obvious to them what those things are and what they mean, that it's kind of hard to take a step back and see it as from the perspective of somebody else. Like going back to your earlier question, like someone who can do that makes a really great spokesperson.
I guess my favourite quote is the cloud is actually not a fluffy white cloud. And it's just found it really hard not to laugh at that because it's true. It's just, I know that with phones and we've always had iCloud, but I don't think any of us have really known, at least growing up, I didn't, what that really meant in practice. And no, there's a physical location. It's not up in the sky somewhere. All right, thanks so much, Jess. Before we dive a bit deeper, I'd like to take a moment to tell our listeners just a little bit more about Parisi. So Parisi is a specialist communications firm, and our team help organisations to achieve their commercial objectives, whether that's raising their profiles, boosting their revenue, or attracting new clients and investors. We combine traditional PR and public affairs engagement with marketing and content-led strategies, focusing on delivering the outcomes our clients need, not just ticking boxes. So, Jess, you've now done the big pivot. You've crossed into the dark side. How does it feel having 2 months under your belt in PR?
Well, it's been a weird change for me just because although it's kind of, different side of the coin, different side of the table, it is an extremely different job to be in, and there's much more of a slower pace, and you're kind of thinking about things in the longer term, whereas journalism was very much like focus on the day ahead. Now I'm kind of thinking like the year ahead. So that's been the biggest change for me. But no, I've really enjoyed it so far, and it's been interesting getting to know a whole different company and kind of learning how the business works and working out, okay, what are the key messages for the year ahead? How do we get them across? Who do we want to talk to? And kind of coming up with that strategy and building that out.
Definitely. I think in PR, we see it as you have an advisory role, right, where your client should take your advice because they're paying for it. But also, you've seen this happen. I think you more than any of the rest of us know what makes the successful story. You know what journalists are after. So they should be listening to you. Fingers crossed. And I guess, what is it about the nitty gritty aside from what journalists are looking for? What is it about having that journalism experience that you think has unlocked PR as an area that you want to be in?
You're right. It's kind of about looking at it from the journalist perspective and putting the journalist hat back on and being like, okay, if I was reporting on this, what would I want to cover? What would I say? What would I need? And then from the PR side, just making that as easy as possible for the journalists. So, whether that's getting them data, finding the hook, finding the angle, like really knowing what's going on in the industry, reading around the subjects that you're interested in kind of pitching on, making sure the subject is like timely, relevant, has a good angle. You can provide interviewees, photos. Yeah, I guess it's just kind of greasing the wheels to make the story as easy as possible for the journalist, really.
Good. And I think we talked before about that journo PR relationship and how important it can be. I guess different for you to be on the other side now, but also valuable.
Yeah, yeah, it is different, but I mean, it's interesting being on the other side, and I think it's definitely shown me a lot of shown me a lot of how the other side worked that now makes a lot more sense to me. And yeah, those relationships are still really important. I think that's just the key thing, is that like keeping and building those relationships is what a lot of the media is about, really.
Say this in itself does feel odd. And for the record, I'd like it to be noted that Jess did ask me for the questions in advance, which you were like, I now understand how you feel.
Although having said that, you've gone off what's the word, off piece a little bit, but
I've taking it with the flow, but I'm trying to make it natural here. And I guess forward looking, as you say, you get to go 1 year planning in advance. What's exciting at Seat Unique this year? What can we look forward to in 2025?
Well, without giving away too much, it's definitely a really big year for the company. I mean, they've grown a lot since before I joined, really, and this year is all about growing even more and scaling up and doubling the business, and yeah, just kind of moving really quickly and being very adaptable and flexible. So yeah, there's a lot.
Do you see? Sorry.
There's a lot to come.
Good. No, we're all excited to watch you do really well there. Do you describe Seat Unique as a startup, and do you feel like they can be vocal in the same way as these founders that you encountered at City AM?
Yeah, I would say it's a startup. So they completed the Series A round last year. So yeah, but they have just built out the team quite a lot. So we're a pretty big company now, and just opened a new office in Manchester. So gradually doing my NPR here. What was the other question? Sorry.
Well, I guess just is it going full circle? Do you feel like the senior team can be as vocal as some of those startup founders that you were speaking to at City AM?
I think the founder team are really, really open to being honest and yeah, transparent, and they have a lot of opinions about the industry. And I mean, the ticketing industry is going through a lot of upheaval right now, and they've got a lot of thoughts on it. So it's kind of how we get them across and when, and in a way that makes the most sense to consumers and journalists, and yeah, just like conveys those points effectively, I guess.
Good. I'm going to open the floor and say, is there anything else you want to add on our big question? What makes a good communicator? Anything that we've maybe not covered?
I guess I'd say, yeah, a lot of businesses and founders are very scared of journalists. Definitely noticed that a lot when I was a journalist. When you'd go into a room and they'd be like, oh, just very kind of guard up, closed down. And not everyone, some people are amazing communicators naturally. But yeah, I guess getting exposure to speaking to journalists and building those relationships, not just from the PR perspective, but, you know, allowing the CEO and the founders to kind of go out there and get the numbers of journalists, because what journalist doesn't like having the CEO's number on their phone, you know? So yeah, just kind of helping put the guard down, and not gatekeeping information or people. That's probably the most helpful thing. But then again, that's also from a very journalist perspective. So
I know, as a PR, it's like, you're so not giving out your phone number. No way. I feel like in some cases, yeah, as you say, it depends on the communicator and how good they are. I don't always mind.
yeah, it depends how well the spokesperson is media trained, I guess.
Yes. Oh, yes. And just in some cases, like, I know you think you can, but it's just better to be
Yeah.
safe. Sorry. Oh, but thank you so much, Jess. It's been really great to speak to you about everything communicating. So this has been Jess Jones and Shivani Lodhia. You've been listening to The Communicators, a new interview series by Parisi. If you've got any questions, either for Parisi or for Jess, drop us a line in the comments or feel free to get in touch with us via email. And don't forget to hit the like button. Tune in next time. Thank you.